I really didn't want to make this video. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Isa and I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user, and my family has gone to Disney cruises for years because it is the most accessible for our family with multiple people with disabilities. However, in August, we went on the Disney Wish for the first time as a family, and unfortunately, we had less than a stellar experience with the accessibility. And with Treasure coming out fairly soon, I wanted to have a candid conversation about the accessibility aboard the Wish. I've made a video about why my family has done Disney cruising before, and you can watch that. I kind of discuss everything, but the short end of it is number one, cruise ships do not have to be ADA because they are built outside the United States, so the Americans with Disability Act does not apply to them. However, Disney cruise ships tend to be ADA accessible, and as someone who uses a wheelchair with a grandmother who also uses a wheelchair, it's very important for our family to be able to actually access the space that we're going to be occupying, especially since for me, and this is the other part of cruising, is it's very difficult for me to travel. It's very difficult for me to fly. There's always the risk of breaking my chair, especially traveling internationally. I don't know what the accessibility is going to be look like, and so sometimes cruising is the closest I'll ever get to actually getting to see places outside the United States, even if I don't leave the ship. And that's just kind of a cool experience. Some people think it's silly not to get off the ship. I know there are wheelchair users who do get off the ship and go on adventures at the ports. That's just not something that I particularly like to do. I like to enjoy the ship, which is partly, I think, some of the reason why I was so disappointed in the Wish. Part of the reason why I took so long to make this video is because I work for the Walt Disney World Company. I do not speak for the brand of the company. I do not work for Disney Cruise Line. But I did want to make a video like this because I feel like if I had seen something like this, I'd have a better expectation of what the ship was going to be like before I got on board, and that would have improved my experience overall. Let's start with an overview of the good because there certainly was good. I did a whole vlog talking about the ship and the experience overall and our family trip. I love watching these back and being able to see my family and have the fun that we had because we definitely did have fun. The first thing that I really liked was the ADA section designated specifically for people who are using like mobility aids or who needed some extra space because of neurodivergency or whatever. Typically, 100% honest, I don't go to the sail away party. I don't go to the pirate show. I'll watch it from like a deck away because I don't like the crowds. I get very overwhelmed. I hate feeling trapped, and especially as a person with a mobility aid, I constantly feel trapped in crowds. And so there was a designated area for us to all sit together, which was also really nice because in the parks, the ADA section is typically they'll have the person with the mobility aid sit in front and then have everyone else stand to the back. So if you are a standing member of the party, you have to stand to the back, which means you do get separated for the length of the show. But that didn't happen because they put chairs down specifically for my family and other guests, which was really cool. The other thing I really liked about the ship was the larger service dog relief area. We took my sister's service dog on her last trip before retiring, and she likes to pace, and so there was actually enough space for her to pace. Typically, it's in a smaller corner, which is perfectly understandable. Very thankful for everything, but especially for the larger space, and it's just nice and set away from everyone else. And the last thing I want to say is that, per usual, the accessible room was great. There was enough space for all of us. We had 2 wheelchairs and a service dog, and that was perfect for my family. We had a veranda room. I wish I had footage. I think I accidentally deleted it all, but it was a nice room. I appreciated it. Normal good things, reasons why we cruise Disney typically. And now we'll get into the things that are bad. And I'm going to be fully honest that a lot of it comes from like one specific experience that then just felt like it expanded into the other things. And I don't think the other things would feel as strong if this one like central part hadn't happened. So before going on this cruise, I had heard a couple things. First off, that Imagineers had worked very hard on the accessibility for the ship, that they're using new technology and all of this stuff, and it was supposed to be very cool. That the Aquamouse was accessible, that there were going to be lifts for things, that the stages were going to be accessible, all of these things. But I had also heard that some other things were not as conveniently accessible as the other cruise ships. The big thing is that this cruise ship is a different format than the other cruise ships because they all kind of match each other. The Dream and the Fantasy are larger versions of the Wonder and the Wish because if you're new to Disney cruising, they're sister ships and they share the same like framework overall. But the two sisters, and then it just goes on and so forth. And the Wish is a new format for the cruises. But typically, I can't go on water slides because there's stairs, and I can't wait forever and a day, even though I'm ambulatory, in a line in the heat to go on a water slide that's probably going to make me very tired and make me more likely to fall and hurt myself on the way back to getting to my chair. I had seen a picture of the Aquamouse line, which was a ramp. And I was so excited because ramps are such a simple form of infrastructure that changes the entire environment. And I could wait in line like everybody else, and it was just going to be so cool. And I was like, you know what, everybody? We're all wearing our swimsuits when we get on the ship so that we don't have to change, that we can just go straight on the Aquamouse and try it out. And because we had the service dog and because we had my grandma, we sent my siblings first, and then my mom and I went afterward. My sisters used the stairs, so they didn't know how to get there the accessible way, but there were plenty of cast members, crew members, I don't know what they're called, crew members, I think, out and about that their entire job is to tell you where to go. So my mom and I ran up to them and were like, hey, where's the accessible entrance for the Aquamouse? And nobody seemed to know. And in fact, somebody even told us that there wasn't an accessible entrance for the Aquamouse. And I was like, that's not what I had heard. That doesn't seem correct. So then we finally found the elevators because the elevators are a whole separate thing that I will be talking about. We found the specific elevator that goes to the specific fort that's just the Aquamouse. We get to the Aquamouse. The lady, as I'm going to get in line, stops me and she's like, can you walk? Well, she doesn't ask me. And this is really the part that starts to frustrate me more than anything else, is that this crew member stopped me, addressed my mother and asked, can she walk? And she kept repeating it. Even though I would be responding, she would ask questions and direct them towards my mom. And I was like, hey, I can speak for myself. And I'm not unused to this experience. It's not unique. However, Disney has exceeded my expectations in their training previously, that I typically don't experience that while I'm on vacation with Disney in any form. So she tells us that we can't use the ramp. Then she guides us to the stairs thinking it's a length issue. And I was like, I had heard that there was an accessible entrance. I want the accessible entrance. So like how would a wheelchair user who's not ambulatory, how would they get to the line? And also it was my first day. I didn't want to overextend myself. I was hot and I just really wanted to explore this because I have this YouTube channel and I wanted to talk about it and I thought it was really cool and I wanted to be able to share this really cool thing with my audience. So we found out that there's a lift. Okay, there's a lift. It's not my favorite thing because lifts break down, but that's okay. Except no one seemed to know how to use the lift. And they had to get a coordinator who figured out how to use the lift. We went on the ride. It was cool. I enjoyed the ride. That was awesome. They let us go twice, which was extra cool. And then the lift broke. And that's no one's fault. Truly, it's no one's fault. I will say if the ramp probably wouldn't have broken, but it was fine. I walked downstairs. They brought my wheelchair down. I was very lucky because I was with my manual chair and not a power chair, so super light. And we got down. It was okay. Then, like, we debated all day, just kind of like going back and forth, like, should we bring this up to guest relations? Should we say something? Not necessarily because the lift broke. Like, that lifts break all the time. It happens. It's disappointing when you spend that much money on a trip And to have the ramp in reach and then it not being wide enough for a wheelchair, and then being told you have to use a lift and the lift breaks. That's frustrating. But what really upset me was when I went to guest relations, because we're like, okay, I just want you to leave a note in your training stuff, just like an update, just like a little note that says, hey, when you have a guest with a disability, make sure that you talk to them and not their party members when you're talking about them. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. And the guest relations crew member told me that, well, some people just don't feel comfortable talking to people with disabilities. Yeah, okay, this is day one. We're determined to have a fun trip. So then I'm frustrated. I'm very frustrated with this situation at this point, but I'm still going to have fun. So I go, hey, is there anything else that I need to know about the accessibility of this ship? And like how to use the stuff? Like, do I have to request someone specifically for a lift or anything? I learned that the ship, there's designated areas that you have to request a lift. That the pool lifts, you can just find a cast member and they should be able to find someone who can use it and knows how to use it, hopefully. And then there are certain areas of the ship specifically that require a lift, and you have to go down to your room, request it, and you have to request it within certain hours. And it was like middle of the day hours, like 10 to 6 or something, like normal business hours, but you're on a cruise ship. And anyway, but you don't get to access those areas outside of that time if you are a person who needs a lift or a ramp. Okay, just gonna set that aside and go to dinner. We went to dinner, and every night we went to dinner, we were not in a super easy to get to space. My mom says that she does think she requested to be close to the stage at Arundel's, and that probably because you said the same table number the whole time, and that probably affected where we sat. And that's because my grandma can't hear, so that's why she wanted that spot. But, and this is such a small thing, and it seems silly to complain about, but it's just the way it added to everything else, because whoever walked us to our tables every night, and it was a different person each night, they were never particularly like watchful of chairs and walkways and if things were wide enough for my wheelchair or my grandma's chair. And my grandma's not the most adept at using her power chair. And so there were several instances where we would get stuck and the server would just be walking on. And then one of my sisters would like have to wait on us and like be that middle person, be like, yeah, they went over there. With all of that said, I want to be clear that there are several crew members who are absolutely lovely, more than not. Like, truly, so many people were so nice and sweet and kind and constantly asking how they can help us, and I really appreciated that. It's just those small things that can offset it. The other thing that really frustrated me is that I have talked on my YouTube channel and I've talked with other disabled people about how accessible Disney cruising has been, and they choose for their brand new ship. Like, it's one thing if it's an old ship, but their brand new ship to be not accessible, that there's certain areas of the ship that we can't access. And we actually found out when we went to the Increda course thing that there wasn't even an observation deck that like where they have foosball and stuff, you couldn't even get to it. That the only way to get up there was either through stairs or if you're going through a crew member entrance. The other cruise ships also have 3 sets of elevators. There's in the forward, the midship, and the aft. In this one, they only had it in the forward and the aft, which means that everyone who's using those elevators were all being shoved into these tiny, tiny elevators, and it didn't really accommodate that many people, especially for 2 wheelchairs. And most of the time, my family had to separate so that we could accommodate like more people. So my family members who could walk would take the stairs, and then my family members who couldn't would take the elevator. But even then, we were constantly having to wait on an elevator, and it's, you know, I'm used to that, but it's just more so than I'm used to. I also just don't like the idea of installing lifts when ramps can be used because ramps are going to be better for everybody. The lifts are great if you can use them as an independent person, but you can't because you need training on them. And it's not safe to let anybody play on them because a little kid could play on it and get hurt. So they're locked up, which means that you have to find a cast member to be able to access certain spaces like the pools or the aqua mouse. And then if not everyone has the training to do it, then that makes it take up more time. And this is only a 3 to 4 day trip. And of course you're not going to get everything done. Of course, like I'm the first person to tell you, like if you're going on a Disney trip of cruise line, Walt Disney World, Disneyland, like you're not going to get everything done. Don't ever expect that you're going to get everything done. But as a person with a disability, I'm more likely than not to have more minutes carved off my trip spent trying to deal with accommodation issues or chronic illness issues. And to have those minutes added to is just very frustrating for how expensive this trip was. I think this is a perfect example of why it's so important for disabled folk of all kinds, wheelchair users and neurodivergent folk or people with chronic illness to be a part of Imagineering and engineering and architecture, that they are seeing the world from their perspective and they're seeing the world from their learned experience, that it doesn't translate all the time, to have someone who's never been in a wheelchair do all of this designing and think of like, oh, this is such cool technology, when a disabled person will be like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work that I have to do to find someone, or I have to go down to my room, call someone, which means I have to find an elevator, get through the narrow pathway in the hallways and try to get through there, get into my room, call them up, then leave, then try to get to another elevator and find the spot that I'm supposed to meet somebody. Guest relations also tried to make it up to me a little bit. They let my family be the first ones to use the Aqua Mouse on the third day because that was the only day after the first day that the lift was working. And that was really nice. And they gave us a Goodwill basket. And I appreciated that. It was really nice of them to do that, but it doesn't change the fact that I was really upset and disappointed. And I did email them and I had a nice conversation with somebody. I just don't know if any of the changes are implemented, and my voice is just one of thousands, and maybe it's just me and I feel like I'm complaining. It's just when you spend this much money on a product for just accessibility, and this is kind of the thing that I talked about in my video when I was talking about housing, of like having to spend so much money on just accessible sidewalks. Like, yes, there's other things that make Disney a high-end product, but what I'm paying for is the accessibility. And when the accessibility isn't there, it is not only devastating, but it's infuriating. And it's so frustrating to not have any space that I can occupy and just trust that it's going to be accessible. I shouldn't have to work so hard to save up to go on these vacations and then spend half of my vacation trying to figure out all of these like accessibility systems when a ramp would do. My mom wants to go back on the Wish and try it one more time. I don't know how I feel. I might not. We'll find out. I'm about to be very, very poor as a grad student, so if someone takes me, maybe we'll do it again, and maybe it'll be a completely different experience. I just feel, especially with the treasure coming out and with more and more people becoming disabled and having videos on my account that I know people are still watching, talking about accessibility on Disney cruises, that I just want to be clear about my experience on the Wish and some of the things that I hope that they change and some of the things to be aware of. And it may not be an impact to other disabled people, but I hope it just gives you a good context of what to expect if you're going on the Wish. Anyway, like always, thank you for listening to me rant and ramble. I really appreciate you guys. Is there another cruise line I should try? It's going to be a while before I can go on another trip that's like a big trip, unless I'm being sponsored. So if someone wants to sponsor a trip for me, I would go. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next week.